Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and today you're checking out an updated solo PVE build for the Elder Scrolls Online. This is the solo Warden Winter's Revenge build. Now I'm trying something a little bit different on this one, and that's because I consider this to be a hybrid build for the Warden. On the Warden class, of course, we have access to a lot of magic abilities, including heals, buffs, and of course ice magic, which this build is going to focus on. Combined with that, we've got the big old 2H hammer on the front bar, providing some nice cleave damage, some nice buffs, and then of course our bow on the back bar. So yes, we are mixing ice damage with physical weapon damage in a way that I just think is a lot of fun to play. And if you're looking for a Warden build that's a little bit different, I think you'll enjoy it too. So let's jump right into the stats on our hybrid Warden setup. Keep in mind, this is a solo build primarily, so it's not a pure DPS build. I don't think hybrids are quite there yet. But for soloing, this works great. We have great survivability, great healing, we have damage absorption, and solid damage as well. So that's what we're going to be focused on here on this setup. I'm also not completely min-maxed yet. I don't have my Undaunted stats, for example. So you could definitely improve this build. But as a baseline, here's what you can expect. So about 17k max magicka, 20k max health, about 31k max stamina. Our recoveries are very good, about 1100 magicka recovery, 1000 health recovery, 1500 stamina recovery. We actually have a little bit more than that on the stamina side because we're running the bull netch, so closer to about 2k stamina recovery there. Our weapon and spell damage, because remember this is a hybrid build, those do go up with our netch, coming in at about 3400 weapon and spell damage with that netch. And then once we have our Berserker glyph active, you're sitting at right about 4k weapon damage and spell damage on the build. Criticals are looking pretty solid, coming at 40% weapon critical, 26% spell critical. And then of course our resistances do go up with our ice armor, sitting at 22,000 spell and physical resistance. And this is primarily medium armor. I'm running 5 pieces of medium on this build, so just keep that in mind. Attribute points wise, I did put everything into stamina. That's because most of my damaging abilities are coming in from the stamina side. I am using the Bewitched Sugar Skulls food. This is just super good for maxing out your stats. We have great max magicka, health, and stamina, plus the health recovery is very nice for solo. Lover Mundus for your Mundus Stone. I think this is going to be ideal because this is buffing both your physical and spell penetration. So this is kind of an ideal Mundus Stone for a hybrid build because it's actually doing two things. Unlike some of the other Munduses, like you only get weapon damage or spell damage, you only get stamina or magicka. That's kind of the problem with hybrid builds. But this Mundus is very good for hybrids. For the potion here, I'm just using an Essence of Weapon Crit. That's because I don't have my weapon crit buff. I didn't have room for that one, but I do have Brutality and Sorcery. And this also gives me stamina and health back, which is very nice. You can also use tri-stat potions if you want. If you find yourself using the magicka side of this build a little bit more, then definitely run tri-stat potions instead. You have a little bit less critical, but you'll have more magicka sustain, so that's going to be excellent as well. And then last but not least, let's talk about the race. Since I am, of course, a Warden, ice-focused warrior type build, I had to be a Nord. It just, got that RP flavor going. But the stats are actually pretty good for soloing. I mean, you got the max health, which is great. You have max stamina, which is good as well. Plus, the ultimate generation is actually very good on this build. We can pump out those ultimates a lot quicker than we would be able to normally. And then since we're not running heavy, we're actually running medium. The rugged passive makes us actually extra tanky. So I do like the Nord a lot for this setup, but I think you can make anything work here, really. It's not a min-max build, so it's really just your preference in this case. Then for the back bar, we've got the Shacklebreaker bow with an infused trait. Infused is going to be key here because we do have the Berserker enchant, which with our buffs, that's going to give us about 600 weapon and spell damage, making our abilities hit even harder. So I do recommend Infuse there as the trait, and then the Berserker enchant. Now that's going to take care of 2 pieces, and then you just need 3 more pieces. I would probably recommend running Jewelry for your other 3 pieces, just because it's going to be easier to craft than our next set. But really, you can mix and match the pieces here with our other crafted set. based on what kind of research you have, or if you're buying it or getting somebody to make it for you. Now, the next set that we are using here is going to be the New Moon Acolyte set. This is a new set with the Dragonhold DLC, and it's another crafted set. This is a little bit harder to make though, 9 traits on this one. But let's check out the stats here, which again are really good for hybrids. You have weapon critical and spell critical, weapon damage and spell damage, physical penetration and spell penetration, and then weapon and spell damage. I mean, this is another great hybrid set. Pretty interesting. You get basically everything you need as a hybrid build, so it is great for this setup. Now, it does increase the cost of your active abilities by 5%, but we have so much recovery that I built in, plus we have extra recovery and sustain on a Warden, so I don't really find this being an issue at all, and I just love the stats. It's great for a hybrid type of setup. Now, in terms of your traits, you are going to want Divines on the body as much as you can. That's just going to help your Lover Mundus hit a little bit harder. I do have 2 infused pieces, I believe, on the chest and legs. Yep. So infused is good on the big pieces, on a hybrid build especially, because you really need as much max stats as possible. So you could even run an infused head, although I don't have that yet. But I have stamina enchants on everything here. Now, you can run tri-stat enchants and then maybe just adjust your attribute points as needed, but that would be quite a bit more expensive. So if you're just starting off with this type of build, then you can just put stam enchants. They're much cheaper. Now, for our monster helm, I went with something that I think really fits the theme of our Ice Warden, and that's, of course, the Ice Heart set. Not only does this fit the theme, but it's an excellent set for soloing in the Elder Scrolls Online because it gives you a damage shield, about a 10k damage shield for 6 seconds, and it refreshes every 6 seconds, and it also does AoE frost damage. So this just fits perfectly with what we're trying to do on the build, and it's also very good for keeping you alive, helping you survive some harder fights in the game. Now, currently I do have this as 2 pieces of heavy. That's all I have access to on this character. If you have Undaunted maxed out, you could definitely do 1 heavy here and 1 light, just to get the extra max stats. That would be an excellent way to run the build. So we've got Ice Heart, we've got Shackle Breaker, we've got New Moon Acolyte, and let's see, jewelry traits. This was important as well. So since I am using 2 crafted sets, I was able to craft all my jewelry in infused. I think that's really a good way to run this because we can get just more stats. So I've got an infused necklace with spell damage. That's helping to kind of equalize my spell and weapon damage. I've got an infused ring with magicka recovery. That's just going to help me sustain my magicka abilities a little bit more. And then an infused ring with stamina recovery. So focusing on the recoveries of this build, I just thought it was the way to go. It makes the build a lot easier to sustain, so you don't run out of resources. That was my preference. You can obviously run other traits here. You could play around with the triune trait if you want a little bit more max stats. But I just went with recoveries, and then again, a balanced spell and weapon damage. So let's jump into the skills next, where it gets a lot more interesting. So 2-hand front bar, and then bow back bar. Again, I have a mix of abilities here. I have actually 5 stamina, 5 magicka abilities, and then some flex spots, which we'll talk about. Starting off on the front bar, we've got Sub Assault. This is our main spammable skill on the build. It does very good AoE damage, plus that gives us Major Fracture, so that's a physical resistance debuff for 6 seconds, and it is AoE. So we do have a lot of AoE and cleave damage pressure on the build, which is very nice. Great for clearing through trash, great for clearing through dungeons. Combined with Brawler on the front bar, of course, this is one of the best stamina abilities for soloing in ESO because it gives you a nice damage shield, which actually increases based on the amount of enemies hit. So the more enemies you hit with this, the greater the shield will be. Now this combined with our Ice Heart, Monster Helm basically means we can have a bigger damage shield than our full health, depending on how many enemies we hit. So it's really nice just for survivability, and the damage is decent as well. Next up, we've got Bird of Prey. This is just a magicka buff. It does give us movement speed, and of course the passive Minor Berserk, which is an 8% damage boost on all of our abilities, which is really nice. You don't always need this necessarily, but it is very nice just to boost your overall damage. Also to run a little bit faster to get through a dungeon or overland, something like that. I do like it. You can slot other things here. You could, for example, slot the 2-hand reverse slice execute skill if you're really wanting to clear through trash or finish off bosses faster, I would recommend that. Now next up on the front bar, we've got Arctic Blast, and this is just more AoE damage. And now we get to kind of the Magicka side of things, where we are doing frost damage with a nice heal actually, and a stun. So it's doing a nice little burst heal up front, a little bit of a heal over time for 5 seconds, and then some decent AoE frost damage over time. So I really, really like this again for those AoE pulls. It just helps to basically obliterate enemies faster. Now for a single target fight, like a boss fight or something, I am going to swap this out for Growing Swarm instead. And what Growing Swarm does is a nice physical damage dot over 10 seconds, plus it gives us minor vulnerability, meaning those bosses are going to take 8% more damage. It also has some AoE potential if there's adds in the fight, for example. So single target or longer fights like boss fights, I will put in Growing Swarm here, but just for, basic trash pulls, overland stuff, Arctic Blast is a lot of fun to play with. Now next up we got Rally, and this is really important actually, because Wardens don't have a lot of good burst heals. They have more AoE healing and heal over time, so they're really lacking a burst heal in their kit. Something like a Templar has Breath of Life. Sorcerers have their pets. So this really fills in the gap. We don't even need the Major Brutality because we get that on the back bar. It does give us minor endurance though, so that stamina recovery is nice. And again, that burst heal. Now you don't get the burst heal immediately. You do need to keep the buff up, and then the longer the buff is running, the larger the heal will be. So just keep that in mind. It's not necessarily an instant burst heal. You have to have the buff up and then you get the burst heal. But you do get a very nice heal. Even if you cast it halfway through, it is nice. Now for the ultimate here, I'm running kind of something weird, but I think it makes sense for a hybrid build, and that's Feral Guardian. I'm using this more as just a passive ultimate. Now I don't have this double barred. I think we have a better ultimate that we can use for damage and for protection, but the passives that you get for this are nice. We'll talk about passives in a minute, but basically I get 2% extra damage for each animal companion ability slotted. So I'm getting extra damage here. Now, why not something like Dawnbreaker of Smiting, which gives you extra weapon damage? Well, again, this is a hybrid build, so the Dawnbreaker buff will only apply to my physical damage, stuff like Brawler and Sub-Assault, whereas if I'm slotting Feral Guardian, Animal Companions buffs all my damage. Not just physical damage, but it's also going to buff my ice damage as well. So I think this makes sense in the front bar as a passive ability. Swapping to the back bar, we've got more ice damage here with Winter's Revenge, which I named the build after. This is just a great damaging skill, you guys. It did get a little bit of some buffs, I believe. It actually is going to do more damage than our Arrow Barrage, for example. But it also gives us a nice snare on our targets, making them easier to kind of group up, and a chance for Chilled. Now, Chilled is really important when you're soloing. What that does is it applies minor maim to your target. That means the enemy is going to do 15% less damage to you. Since you are soloing on this build, that's a big deal. That's a really good debuff to have. As a Warden, you also have a bonus chance to proc Chilled, so you have very good uptime on this, as well as if you're combining it with Arctic Blast, which also has a chance to apply that shield status effect. It's a really, really good combination. And again, we got that ice magic theme going here. So that is AoE damage on the back bar. We do combine that with another AoE skill from the stamina side, that's Endless Hail. Now, Endless Hail doesn't do as much damage as it used to in the past. It also has a significant cost increase in the Dragonhold DLC, but the fact that we're running medium armor really kind of offsets that. And you're using it for the enchant more than for the damage itself. Remember that we are using a Berserker enchant on this bow. So Endless Hail is giving us constant uptime of that 500 to 600 weapon and spell damage every 5 seconds. That's basically why we are running this. Now next up, I do have a heal. I like having a heal on both bars. So a front bar heal, we got Rally. And then for our back bar, we're going to run Leeching Vines. And this is more of a heal over time, kind of a sustained heal. But this gets stronger and stronger the more enemies you face. So it does give you a heal over time while you're taking damage, a little bit over 1k per second for 10 seconds. But then it does apply minor lifesteal to all the enemies that hit you for the 10 seconds as well. So let's say that you're clearing a dungeon, you pull 10 mobs, every one of those has a chance of healing you for that 642 health every second. So it can stack up quite a bit. Keep in mind though that you do need to do damage to get the minor lifesteal to proc. It's not going to be a big deal though, because you have all your AoEs, right? You have Winter's Revenge, you have Endless Hail, you have Arctic Blast potentially. All of those will proc the minor lifesteal on enemies. Next up, we got our buffs. We've got Bull Netch. This is just our stamina sustain. Now, I do like how this applies now Major Brutality and Sorcery. So that's weapon and spell damage that get increased by 20%. That's why the Warden makes a really good choice if you're interested in this kind of hybrid play style. You can use either Bull Netch or the Betty Netch and get both of your damage buffs in one ability, which is great. We also get a nice cleanse from this buff. Every 5 seconds, you get to remove one negative effect. So that's nice. Like I said, there's a bit more stamina drain on this build since you are spamming, Brawler and Sub Assault. So I recommend Bull Netch there for the stamina sustain. And then of course, Ice Fortress. This is our armor buff. It also gives us minor protection, which is really, really good for soloing. That's an extra 8% damage reduction while we have this buff active. Then for our ultimate, we've got Permafrost. This does excellent frost damage. In an AoE, it reduces their speed and it gives you major protection. So not only do you have minor protection always up passively, if you're in a really rough spot, you can pop your ultimate and now you have 30% damage reduction on top of the 8%. So this is the ultimate I'm going to use on the build. Like I said, I'm not going to use the Guardian. That's just for passives. But I am going to use this Permafrost ultimate all the time, and it is great. Fits the ice theme of the Warden, and it's just an amazing, amazing ultimate. While we're here, let's go ahead and explain the passives that are important on the build. Starting with Animal Companions, all of these are very good passives. I definitely recommend picking up all of these. Got Bond with Nature. This gives you a nice little mini heal every time you use your Sub Assault. Savage Beast, you get ultimate back. This means we get that Permafrost ultimate up pretty quick on this build, especially if you're a Nord. Flourish gives you extra magicka and stamina recovery. That's very important on the hybrid setup as well. You just need to make sure you have one Animal Companion ability at least on each bar, and we do, of course. We've got 3 here and 1 on the back bar. Now, Advanced Species, this is why I'm slotting the Bear ultimate, because we get that increased damage done by 2% for each Animal Companion ability slotted. So we are up to 6% bonus damage, which is very good. And again, this is all damage done. This is not just physical damage. It's not just magic damage. It applies to all damage sources. That's why I think it makes more sense to slot the Bear here than Dawnbreaker, for example. Now, under Green Balance, you'll get some of these with your Living Vines on the back bar. You have a chance for Major Mending, for example, when you get low health. You do get some Magicka and Stamina Sustain based on whichever pool is lower, and that will happen while you have Living Vines active. You get extra healing done. That'll only be on the back bar, though. It's not a huge deal. You could probably skip that one if you want to. But the Maturation passive is excellent for soloing. This gives you 10% max health for 20 seconds anytime you activate a heal. So that can be basically any heal. Your Rally heal. That can even be the extra heal that you get from Sub Assault from your Animal Companions passive. They'll give you that 10% health, which is very nice for soloing. Then checking out Winter's Embrace. These are more of our defensive passives. Now, Glacial Presence is actually pretty cool because we talked about that shield status effect, which gives a minor maim. This means you have a very good chance to proc that, which is very good for soloing. That's going to reduce all the enemy's damage that's hitting you, making you take less damage overall. So this is good. Make sure you pick that one up. Frozen Armor does give you a little bit extra defensive, especially on our back bar since we're running 3 Winter's Embrace skills here. So that is nice. Icy Aura, not really a big deal for soloing. But Piercing Cold is nice because we do increase some of our frost damage. So on your Arctic Blast, on your Winter's Revenge, even on your Permafrost, you're actually getting 10% extra damage from this passive. So make sure you get that one too. Weapon passives, it's pretty easy. You just want to pick up all your 2-hand passives here. These are very, very good. Especially Balanced Blade, you'll get the cost reduction, which is nice. Battle Rush, one of the best passives in the game, in my opinion. You get that extra 30% stamina recovery anytime you get a kill on your front bar. That's very nice. And of course, we are running bow on the back bar, so bow passives here. The most critical one probably would be the Ranger passive. That's going to reduce the cost. And then accuracy is nice too. You get the extra weapon crit when you're on your back bar. Now, this is a medium armor setup with how I'm running it. So you do want all of these except maybe improve sneak. You could probably skip this one. but the rest of these are great. You get extra weapon critical, extra stamina recovery and cost reduction, extra weapon damage, and of course extra movement speed, roll dodge, cost reduction. Those are excellent. Well, the way I have this set up, I'm using 2 pieces of heavy, so I am getting some good buffs here from just the first 3 passives. The other 2 here you won't be able to make use of unless you craft your armor in heavy, but I wouldn't recommend that because it's not going to give you enough cost reduction. So we've got extra physical and spell resistance, extra health recovery, some sustain, and then extra max health. Very, very good. If you're running 1 heavy and 1 light for your monster set, then you can also pick up the first 3 light armor passives. Those will help with some cost reduction and some extra recovery as well. So those will be nice to have. Fighter's Guild, I'm not really using these, but you can pick up Banish the Wicked. That still gives you ultimate back when you're killing undead. And then of course Undaunted, if you have that maxed out, pick up the Undaunted Metal passive. Assault, we're not really using these. Now you can use Vigor. I forgot to mention you can slot Vigor on the back bar if you don't like Leeching Vines. That's another option. But you can completely bypass PvP if you want on this build, no problem. Always pick up your racial skills and of course Alchemy, medicinal use for that extra potion duration. That's going to be really nice for sustain on the build. All right, so we talked about abilities, we talked about passives. Let's talk about champion points because this ends up being even more important, in my opinion, when you're running hybrid builds. Now, one of the problems I think with hybrids is that champion points doesn't really support hybrid builds very much because it's so specialized. Things like, magic recovery or stamina recovery. We have things like spell penetration or physical penetration. So that's one of the issues I see, that if ZeniMax ever decides to change champion points, hopefully it'll be in a way that supports hybrid builds a little bit more. But in the meantime, basically what it means for this kind of build is you just have to spread your points a little bit more. So you're not going to be as focused in certain categories. You're going to be more spread out. So just keep that in mind. And this is for 810 CP right now. So in the green tree, we got 26 into Warlord, 23 into Sprinter, 43 in Tenacity. I do heavy attack a little bit on the front bar with a 2-hander to get some nice stamina sustain from this. 37 into Healthy, 49 Arcanist, 56 into Mooncalf. So you can see I'm boosting all 3 recoveries here, which is helpful. And then over here, just 13 into Shadow Ward and 23 into Tumbling. In the blue tree, this is where you start to really see the split. 27 into Blessed, 27 into Elemental Expert, and 22 into Spell Erosion. So these are affecting our ice damage abilities. Now what's nice about this is because we have extra points here, we actually unlock Spell Precision. Because we have more than 30 points in this tree, we get that extra bonus to Spell Critical. So that is a nice bonus here to get. Over here we have 56 Master at Arms, and that's going to affect our direct damage, so like our Sub-Assault or Cleave. 48 into Thaumaturge. So Thaumaturge is actually nice because this is going to buff both our Magicka and our Stamina damage over time abilities. So you can even put more in here if you want, because you're getting a good benefit from this. 22 Precise Strikes, 21 into Piercing, that's only physical penetration, and then 49 into Mighty. And in the red tree, we got 56 into Ironclad, 1 left over for Spell Shield, 49 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, 37 Thick-Skinned, 27 into Quick Recovery, and 51 into Bastion. This would only be if you're running the Ice Heart monster set. If you don't use Bastion, I think it comes in at like 7 or 8k damage shield. With Bastion, it gets up closer to 10k on that monster set, so it is a nice way to boost that. So I think we covered everything. The outfit here is just a combination of the Breton style and mercenary motifs. And I believe I have the Nord Warhammer. Gotta have the Nord Warhammer on the build. So as usual, I'll put a couple boss fights at the end here just so you can get a better idea of how the build plays and how it works. Overall, though, this has been a really fun build to play this week. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, if you did, don't forget to crush that like button for me and leave a comment below. It really helps the video get noticed right here on YouTube. So I always appreciate your input and your feedback. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I make Elder Scrolls Online videos here every week. We have a great community here that's growing very quickly, so definitely consider joining us. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you around in the next video.